Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about All of Us Are Dead episode 5, so full spoilers for the episode. And we have another example of a human who has been turned but not into a regular zombie. Unfortunately, the Billy character is, much like the bullied girl, is now immune to zombies. He's changed, you know, and there's a little bit of intercut stuff from the scientists talking about how it's kind of learning to adapt to humans, and this type of different version of an undead person who's intelligent still is there. I talked last episode about how the bullied girl there was some dramatic irony in her being an outsider even to the dead. Like, even as a zombie, she couldn't be like fit in with the group. I think the themes with the bully himself is a little bit different in that it kind of felt like it kind of tied in more to something I was saying else about the overall themes of the show, which was the idea of like giving in to the base urges and the anger and the rage and your basic needs versus compassion, empathy, and all those things. It kind of feels like the bully happening to like enjoy and fit into a zombie apocalypse, and like this being kind of the person he always was anyway, also thematically really works with that idea, I think, in a lot of ways. So there's some really good stuff with that plot though. I really enjoyed the library sequence. I think it's one of the best action scenes the show's had. You've got them chasing each other across the top of the bookcases. It did a really smart thing where there's a surviving kid who's still up in one of the bookcases from like episode 2, who immediately throws Chung off the bookcase. So when the bully throws him off like a minute later, even that was like 20 seconds later, you're like, you know what, you earned your death. Like, I'm not feeling bad about you. But there's a lot of good stuff. I love the zombie jumping at Chung-san and like hitting the light. It was that delightfully kind of awkward, the way he kind of hit it. It was a really standout moment, I thought. And then the actual fight itself surprised me, and part of it is because it appeared that the bully died, and there was a split second where I was thinking, oh, is he going to be like the girl? And it turned out he was, but it didn't reveal that until much later in the episode. But I was very, very surprised when they're fighting on top of the bookcase, and Chung-san, first of all, pulls out a suave move where he hits the phone out of the bully's hand and catches it before it falls. But then he stabs him in the eye with the corner of the phone, which is... I love it. I'm a fan of... This is such a weird thing to talk about, but I feel like when you're in movies and TV shows, there's very typical places for characters to be stabbed or shot or whatever, right? They always get shot in the chest or the head, maybe the leg if it's meant to just be like a immobilizing kind of shot thing, but there's like set places they always aim for, and the set places you always see them hit. It was one of the things. There was an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. In the middle of that show where someone gets shot like in the side, and it was really awkward, and I kind of liked it because it felt like so natural and awkward that it was in a weird place. So I kind of love... Now, the eye, of course, is not an irregular target necessarily, but using the corner of a fairly blunt object, a fairly everyday blunt object to do it. But if you stabbed full force with all your might into someone's eye, you would damage the eye. You would do enough damage. So I thought that was brutal and gnarly, and it was a visceral moment. It felt like Chung-san, it was the first time he's really had to fight a human in the show, I think. And, there's obviously a bit of confliction as the bully falls to the horde of zombies who all start biting him. But, the result of this is that we now have the bully who is still technically alive. I say technically, maybe undead still in a way, but he can just walk through the zombies, and he has a vendetta. He wants to get revenge for his eye, as well as probably everything else. And that is, really bad news for the main characters. And I was thinking as he was dying, seemingly earlier in the episode, oh, I really thought he was going to stick around and be this antagonist for the show. So when he did get back up later in the episode, I went, not only is he still around as an antagonist, you've given him this unbelievable advantage. You've given him this godhood in a situation where he is immune to the main threat that everyone else has around them. So one of the few things in this fight as it was happening was the dangling of each other over the side of the bookcase to, like, you know, push them into the zombies, because that's the big threat, and it's an easy way to kill someone in this world. All of a sudden, that advantage, or that, not even advantage, that even playing field is gone. And now he can force them into zombies for his own advantage, but he can't be forced into the zombies himself. So it raises the stakes, it makes him more of a dangerous villain. He was already pretty capable beforehand, and obviously he was erratic, and he would just do things on a whim for his own good. He murdered someone last episode, obviously, but this makes him more dangerous, and that's kind of exciting. So the show's doing a really good job of escalating things in these different ways as it goes on, and that's really cool. Chung San, of course, spends some time in the episode after he's dodged some zombies inside the wall. He kind of like goes into an access panel and ends up inside, and he has to break his way out. He has an emotional moment where he breaks down in tears because the phone lines have been cut. We see, I won't mention too much of this, but there's a couple of, you know, scenes where we see like the military and the media, and just we're in martial law. They decide to cut the phone lines and the internet because they don't want misinformation spreading, or at least that's what they're saying. And this is right when he's got a chance to call, the Archer group has a chance to call and use the internet, and none of it works because they've actually cut off their means of communication, which feels like feels very unhelpful for anyone who is surviving. Even if they're still saying we're going to come and save the survivors, the uninfected will be rescued, doesn't, I don't know, it feels a little bit like you're maybe just cutting your losses, shall we say. But he has this emotional moment where he kind of starts crying and yelling, and I thought that was a well done moment. The other emotional beat where when he sort of like brings up the courage to sort of bust out of the panel later on, is he remembers moments with Onjo throughout the show and his best friend, and sort of gives him this drive to make a move. And he ends up in one of the music classes, and there seems to be a zombie or something under the piano which has been knocked over. And also teases there's someone else in the instrument storage room at the back of the class, because we see it when he comes in, but right at the end there's like a little POV shot of someone looking out. So there's someone in there, so we'll see who that might be next episode. The flip side of all this, of course, is the other kids who have a couple of interesting little scenes. There's a sort of philosophical scene at the start talking about kids dying versus adults, and like how one is losing hope, one is losing wisdom, and the debate if like they're important enough to be saved. That idea, are we important enough to be saved first or second or third, like that kind of comes up a little bit throughout this episode. So this question of their value is raised once again. But the main plot of this is that, and this is kind of feeding into the main romance, and it's very sweet, is that Onjo is like, no, we have to figure out if Chung San's alive. You know, she's distraught when Sehyuk comes back without him, and they end up forming this plan of going back up to the science lab, and not the class itself, but the sort of the office that's connected to it, which notably is where all those infected mice or rats are. And the sort of smart kid with the glasses, like, yeah, there's drone parts in there, I can put a drone together, you know, because they were already making them. It wasn't like he's going to like assemble one from scratch. Like, they were close to being done, then he just can tinker with it a bit and get it ready. So we get a little mission from them going up and getting the parts, and it leads to this really nice sequence which does a couple of things. One, it does give them this moment of relief when they see that Chung San's okay. And that plays really nicely, because Onjo was worried throughout the episode. Sehyuk was also really worried throughout the episode. They have a couple of moments which kind of lets, you know, Prez, which, I mean, Namra I think was her name, but I think Prez is what we're going with, because that's what the characters are referring to her as. But she is sort of noticing this, and she's kind of having a bit more of a flirtatious moment with Sehyuk. But anyway, like, they see him, he's alive eventually, but they're distraught up until that point because like all the classes are filled with zombies. It was a really nice beat because it was giving them a nice sort of bird's eye view of the situation in a way that, I mean, they felt like they were surrounded by zombies. It felt like there was no one else left, but now they're seeing it. Now it's confirmed. Now they're actually witnessing all of it. And it's like, okay, we've confirmed he's alive. And do you know what? I actually was almost pleasantly surprised, and not in a way that it would have been bad writing if someone did say, look, it's more important for us to like get the drone out there to the rescue teams and possibly find help than it is to check if Chung-san's alive. Because I thought someone was going to say that. And it was actually very refreshing and made me kind of like the group as a group of like friendly characters more, that no one actually did. In fact, not only that, once they find Chung-san, one of the other, so there's a pair of girls with the one with the sort of the more bob haircut and the one with the ponytail. One of them actually says to Eunjo, "Is it okay if we now look for, you know, help because we've confirmed he's alive?" They actually ask Eunjo how she feels about now. Okay, we've confirmed he's alive. There's no way to signal to him because they can't hear him. In fact, the guy with the drone headset on is like, "Look, they can't hear us." He says it like 5 times because people keep trying to shout at him, and it ends when the camera goes out, and it's actually the truck we saw crash back in like episode 2, maybe 1, whenever that scene was, and it's one of this girl's parents, and she sees them both dead. The drone gets knocked down, and it's just this really distressing thing. She's bawling her eyes out. The others are feeling very awkward. They don't know how to react to it. It's, you know, it's them getting this larger sense of, no, it's not just the school. There's more going on out in the city. And they could have predicted that, but it's just one thing making that assumption and making that logical conclusion. It's another thing actually seeing it and having to accept it. In fact, speaking of logic, there's an interesting little scene where they're debating logic versus hope when they're about to do the drone. Like, what do we need more right now? And it's an interesting little debate. But I enjoyed the comedic ending where the chubby kid's like, Desu, his name is, when he just goes, "I think what we need right now is a drone." Like, we need to do that. Let's do that right now. So I enjoyed all this stuff again. I think it's really well paced, and I love that they've had this little base of this classroom where they're kind of safe for a while, but there's these little missions to venture out because they need things, and I am assuming the subject of food and water, which I was expecting honestly this episode, I suspect that has to come up soon. So really curious to see how they start to handle that. But I love having the sort of the base of operations in this like dangerous situation in this building, but trying to like do these little missions because they need supplies, they need to find help, they need to find whatever. So good stuff. I never even mentioned the Archer group, I think, last episode, you know, the Archer girl and the other characters. And I think it's just because it was such a small part of the episode and it just didn't leave a lasting impression. I mean, it was fine for what it was. It was basically a bit of confrontation between the girls. The Archer, she wants to find her brother, who we find out later is one of the kids in the group, in the main group. Probably the one kid that I wouldn't have known how to describe, because he's probably like the other ones, like the smart kid with glasses, Desu's kid, the chubby kid. Obviously Sehyuk's a main character, and then there's this kid who's just kind of like on his own as far as descriptions go, but now he's the Archer's brother, so now I've got something to call him. But he recognizes not her, he doesn't see her running around, but he recognizes an arrow that's sticking out of somewhere, and maybe it suggests that might be her. And sure enough it is. We see them going through the halls, taking out zombies with their arrows, so they're the most capable of defending themselves right now. The others have got some sticks to stab people with. If I've got a nitpick, actually, funnily enough, is that they actually inadvertently save Chung-san when he's sneaking into the wall, and I really thought that Chung-san was going to hear them talking, because he was literally just in the entrance and like poke his head back out and say hello, and maybe like that would be how the two groups start to sync up. Maybe he'd be with them for a while, but he never did, and I thought that was a little bit strange. I thought he would have for sure heard them talking, because they immediately start talking in the hallway after one of them's taken out the zombie that's got his leg, or reaching for his leg. So that was a bit weird. But they decide they're going to leave. They're going to go to the Archers like training ground. We know whatever building has all that stuff in it. The emergency phone line in there might work because it's a special emergency phone, but it might not. But even if it doesn't, that's where all the arrows are, and they're running out, so they need more ammo. It makes sense. It's a tactical choice. I do suspect the two groups will at some point somehow encounter each other and either team up or whatever, but this was mostly fun stuff, like seeing them use the arrows. It's showing them, again, it's giving them this advantage, right? It's giving them another tool in their arsenal. So if the two groups do sync up, if they end up being one big group, it's like, okay, we've got two people who can fire arrows and reliably hit the zombies in the head. And at that point, it's like, okay, maybe this makes us bold enough to try and get to like a better food supply or something. So all this, you know, is working quite well. Enjoying all the stuff in the school and all the build up of all these characters. There's obviously some other subplots here or there throughout the episode, some which kind of are only in like half the episode and some that are in the back half. The cop and the rookie who are running around and they want to try and get this information that this valuable laptop's at the school. They end up encountering the baby. They end up in the chicken place. And it's like, okay, now we're responsible somewhat for this baby. I will say, like, I like the chemistry between them well enough, but I will say I could have probably done without the sped up footage of them running around the streets. It just, like, I think the show handles, like, switching tones very well, and sometimes it's more fun, sometimes it's more serious, more dramatic. But I will say the sped up footage of them running around like it was, like, Benny Hill-esque. It was maybe just a touch too far in that direction. It doesn't last too long, it's not a big deal, but it did stick out to me a little bit as maybe just a little misfire, shall we say. But definitely interesting to see how some of these plot threads are linking into other plot threads, because, you know, the girl's plot with the baby was kind of done, except for the fact that the baby was left there to be rescued, and now we've kind of, some other plot line is now linked into that. And I like that this cop character, you know, he wasn't really a main character. Like, he confronted the scientist a couple of times. It was only the last episode where it felt like he kind of, it was almost like the scientist transitioned his, like, proper B-level character role over to the cop. And now he's a character we're going to follow. So I think that's kind of neat. But you got that there. The other stuff with with Onjo's dad, and then we get in the helicopter. We get again for ourselves a bit more of a bird's eye view. I guess in a lot of ways, this episode, between the kids getting to watch the drone footage of the entire school, between the media stuff and the actually seeing the military respond and talk about what their plan is, and then the helicopter stuff, all of these plot lines do actually thematically link. Not as strictly as last episode, it's not as strong a link, but there is kind of this general sense of we're opening up the worldview and all of the characters are getting a better sense of how big this is and how much more serious it is. Because even these characters, when they get to this prison that's been turned into a camp, like a site for testing and military deployment and whatever, like they're shocked when they're told that they have to, like, be examined before they'll let the politician into anywhere where she can make, you know, perform her role and presumably have a say in the conversations and the decisions being made. But not only that, they have to wait to be examined, possibly up to 72 hours, and they're put into like a crappy couple of rooms with some beds and some supplies. But they're kind of like spoken down to. You know, the military guy is very adamant that he's not asking, they're not getting exceptions. Like, you're going through the protocol. The fact that you're even getting some little beds that you can sleep on is kind of special treatment. So just shut up and wait. And it's like they're all kind of realizing this is bigger than they even thought. Like the gravity of the situation is like kind of hitting a lot of different characters in this episode in different ways. Wherever they were last episode, their worldview is opened up from where they were. So for the kids, that's going beyond the room and seeing the entire school. For the cop, it's seeing the state of these other parts of the city. And for the politician and Onjo's father, it's like, no, we get to see the entire city, and we get to see how the military and the other parts of the world are responding to this. And they talk about how, like, they're trying to tell the rest of the country to act as normal. Like, you know, the military's got this under control, where we're trying to save as many people as we can and do whatever. It wouldn't shock me if the show ended with the city being nuked, just to deal with it. And it's also interesting that the military and the government have no idea how this started. And we hear that there's rumors of like American, like, nuclear weapons or plants, like, being the cause of it, and just all crazy conspiracy theories being spread. And it's interesting to watch or hear some of that when we know exactly how it spread. We've seen how it spread, but it's fascinating seeing some of that play out. And I don't want it to be like a huge part of the show. Like, I think that the focus should always be the kids in the school, and that is always the main thing. But it's a bit of flavor to sort of expand the world and kind of get a sense of, like, overall what's going on. I think it was just the right amount this episode to not feel like it was bogged down and just all this extra stuff. And yeah, this episode was actually a little bit shorter. This is probably the shortest episode we've had, although still pretty long. Even once you take off like the 7 minutes of ads, it was still like 50 minutes. But notably shorter than the rest of them so far. But that's episode 5. Forgive me if I've glossed over something. But I try and talk about what sticks out to me mostly in the episodes, and I think in a lot of ways the show is very much one big story cut into 12 chapters, in the sense that so many things just follow on from the end of the last episode, whatever the cliffhangers were, wherever the characters were left. But I will say that most of the episodes so far have done a good job of having like a thematic theme, like, a thematic link between the plot lines that makes it feel like that's this episode. So like I say, this one is very much the widening of the scope and people seeing more of the world, and yeah, good stuff. There's good stuff going on. But yeah, let me know what you think of the episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Ding the bell for notifications, of course. All of that does help out YouTube channels a lot, so please do hit the buttons. You can, of course, support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses and help keep all the content coming. So that is me. Thank you very much once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?